Liz, for the very first time, we have a student and a remarkable, awesome, cool student right here with us at ChatEDU.
I know. I am very excited for today.
Welcome, Charli Hughes. How are you?
Hello. How are you, Matt and Liz?
Excellent.
We're great. We're so excited that you're here, and we are thrilled to be talking to you.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Charli came up all the way to our studio here in Litchfield, Connecticut. Where were you today?
I was coming up from Medtronic in North Haven. I'm doing a summer internship there before I go off to college at UConn.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Medtronic.
Yeah, so at Medtronic, I'm working in the testing department. I'm also doing a little bit of programming. I'm working on their Hugo surgical robot project. So I'm working on developing some of those robots to help assist surgeons in complicated, precise surgeries.
We should clarify, by the way, this might now sound like Charli just graduated from college, but she's actually just graduated from high school. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Woodland Regional High School, part of Region 16 out of Beacon Falls, but I'm from Prospect.
Nice. So you're doing some interesting CS work. Tell us a little bit about how you got into CS. What did you learn in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, in high school, I was lucky to be part of a program that was nationally recognized by the College Board for prevalence of women in computer science. So I was able to take several AP computer science classes. But really what got me into CS was robotics. So I was a big robotics kid. I did a lot of FIRST robotics competition, FRC, as well as VEX, and I was the lead programmer on my team. So I definitely got my fair share of hours in just coding away.
That's awesome. So, Charli, we first met over email, and you reached out to me because you were working on a project at school having to do with artificial intelligence. Can you catch us up? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was lucky to be part of the Digital Citizenship Fellowship from Civics Unplugged. And part of that fellowship for me to get completion is completing what's called a solvathon. So in the solvathon, they gave us a fake hypothetical $1 million grant from the federal government to develop a program to be rolled out in all 50 states to help increase the prevalence of AI in education and build a program that would support both students and teachers in AI in education. So I was reading around, I was doing a lot of research on that, and I reached out to my superintendent. And my district is working on their AI in education rollout in the upcoming school year. And I was directed to Matt, so I reached out with some questions, and now here we are.
So what was the project, and what did you kind of learn along the way with your fellow students?
So I think the main thing that I learned in developing this project, which was really just giving us free rein to use $1 million to bring AI into the classroom in any way that we wanted. And the big thing that I learned is that there are still a lot of barriers that need to be overcome that are preventing us from fully rolling out AI across the country. In my opinion, we cannot have equitable AI in education across the country until we at least get students one-to-one, until we can at least guarantee that students have high-speed internet, until we can at least promise students that they're able to get access to computers at all. And that's really a barrier that's still being faced in a lot of our states. And I don't think that we can fairly expect our students to be on equal planes with AI and our teachers to be on equal planes with AI when they're not even on equal planes with Chromebooks.
So when we think about barriers, those were great examples. What are some of the barriers in Connecticut where everybody is already one-to-one? So what are barriers that are facing us in Connecticut?
Well, I think that the main barrier that we have now is just educating people. When we look at some of the surveys that have happened so far, we have more than 80% of teachers that have never received formal AI training. And there's such a huge fear surrounding AI, not just in education, but in society in general. There are so many misconceptions just about what AI is used for. People don't understand that AI has already been part of our lives for years. So now we're rolling it out and we're saying, okay, let's show this to our kids. And it freaks people out, and rightfully so, because they have every right to be concerned about their children, concerned about their children's futures and what their kids are learning. But at the end of the day, I think that it's our responsibility to help people understand all of the promise that AI has for education and for just society in general.
Charli, you are speaking our language.
When you survey teachers, and you see this across the country, there's a few big fears. One of them is that the AI will be a shortcut and that students won't really do some of the hard cognitive work, the writing, the research, the reading. What's your take on that? You obviously use AI in computer programming. It seems like it's probably been a support to you. Is that a shortcut, or is that just how you get the job done? How do you feel about that when it comes to writing something that's not code?
I mean, let's be honest. If you're a student, you're probably going to find any way that you can to cheat. But honestly, I think that saying, I'm afraid of our students cheating, is kind of just taking the easy way out for teachers. I mean, as an educator, I think that it's your responsibility to make the kids do the critical thinking and help them out with that. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier as well, but if you're an educator, chances are you're not writing all of your own lesson plans. There are plenty of places online for you to pull those from, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's helping you do your job more effectively. So I think that we need to adopt that same attitude when we're looking at how students can use AI. I mean, for me, you're totally right. I have been guilty of pulling up ChatGPT or Claude every once in a while when I'm writing some code. And I view that as a starting point, not necessarily as a shortcut.
Okay, interesting. I love where this is going, like right out of the gate, and I appreciate the sort of strength of your thinking around it. Let me push back just a little bit on the teacher piece. So a teacher would argue the difference between you writing and using AI to help write and them using it to write their lesson plan is that they have developed the useful cognitive skills, like the skills to design that lesson plan is something they've mastered over time. Now, not you. You're obviously really proficient as a writer by the time you're a senior. But let's say you're in middle school, and then we compare that to a teacher. In middle school, you may not have developed those core writing skills. Is it the same? Is it different?
I do see where you're coming from, and I get where the teachers are coming from there, but to that, I would circle back and I would say, well, it's your job to make the kids understand why they need to develop those skills. I mean, AI is a tool for people who are obviously proficient in writing. You have to figure out how to engineer those prompts and how to get your desired outcome. But at the end of the day, I think that it's the teacher's job to be able to develop their lesson plans to implement those skills, so students don't feel compelled to use AI as much. I mean, when we think about AI's prevalence in society so far, so much of it is things like games and things like social media. And that's not an application that people necessarily think of as much when they think of AI, because to me, when people think of AI, they think, oh, that's the thing that's going to take my job in 3 years. But just looking at it from that different lens, I think is really important when we're talking about education. And just in general, again, making kids understand why these skills are still essential. I have a brother, he's entering 7th grade, and he has to ask me about why he needs to know algebra. And to me, that's just a failure on his teacher's parts, because kids aren't really developing the skills that they need to look forward to understand why they need these foundational elements of their education. And I believe that it's teachers' responsibilities to make students understand that so that they can then effectively use AI in ways that are productive and not of a detriment to their education.
So during your senior year, what was your experience with your teachers and in your school district as far as AI use? Were you encouraged to use it? Were there places that it was absolutely forbidden? Did you see teachers using it in different ways? Tell us what it was like to be a student in this first kind of big year of AI, or second year maybe.
Yeah, so my district is rolling out their educational AI plan next year after I'm already gone. But in general, I think that there's a lot of suspicion surrounding AI, especially in the humanities departments. People are really freaked out about students using AI to write essays. And it's so interesting to me as someone who has, of course, for testing purposes only, used AI to just generate an essay, see what comes out. And it doesn't sound anything like my writing. And there's no way to engineer that prompt to make it sound like you're writing, unless I guess you could be really good at engineering those prompts. And I certainly know some people who are. But for the average high school student who doesn't necessarily understand the CS behind these algorithms, it's very difficult to produce something that sounds human written. But nevertheless, teachers see something that might be a little bit stronger than a student's typical essay that varies a little bit from their normal capabilities, and their immediate reaction is to accuse them of using AI. So a couple years ago, we actually had a teacher give 2 students zeros for suspected AI use in writing an essay. And these girls didn't use AI to write their essays. They actually just wrote them themselves. They wrote them organically. And we put them in AI detectors, which are not very effective, but we put them in AI detectors to try to prove that AI wasn't used. And they came up clean, and the teacher still wasn't satisfied with that. So it's definitely a difficult situation for educators who obviously want the best for their students, but it's difficult for students who are sometimes the victims of like AI witch hunts.
What do you think is a good strategy for a teacher when that happens, right? So they have this hunch that maybe this feels like it was written by AI. I agree with you 100% that the detectors are not a reliable way to really measure that. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what do you imagine would be an effective strategy when a teacher has that suspicion in terms of how to work with a student from that point?
Yeah, no worries at all. I mean, in this age of AI, I think that a big thing to prioritize is in-class essays. If you have a group of kids where you're really worried and you're thinking, I don't know what's going on here, I don't know if I can trust them, then sit them down, give them a pencil and paper, and have them write it the old-fashioned way, especially in higher-level English classes. I mean, I took AP Literature and AP Language, and in both of those classes, our AP exams were sitting us down, and you have 2 hours to write 3 essays. So I've written my fair share of handwritten essays, and there's really no way to cheat on that. But in general, I just don't think that there's an alternative either to knowing a student's writing style, understanding the way they write, what their inner dialogue sounds like. And once again, that's something that just comes from teachers being effective educators, teachers getting to know their students. So I don't think that the value of that can be understated at all.
Liz sometimes suggests this idea that, a teacher has a hunch they should just sit down next to the student, have the student sit down next to them and say, tell me about this concept in your paper. What did you mean when you talked about intermediation in this paragraph? What do you think of that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point, too. I mean, it's definitely one way to make students articulate the ideas that they put down. And really, for me, I know that there's the idea of like your brain loses everything that you learned when you study for a test and then you regurgitate it and it's all gone. But I don't think that holds true for essays at all. And even if it does, really, if students are learning, you want them to be able to articulate the thing that they just wrote about regardless. So I think that a lot of students might say like, oh, I wrote that essay and I forgot what I wrote about. But really, you should be remembering what you wrote about when you just wrote the essay. So I think that that's definitely a really great point. That's a great strategy that teachers can use.
Yeah, I love the idea of teachers sitting down and having conversations. And I think that's a really great way to assess students without them having to write an essay even before. So maybe there are more presentations and more opportunities for teachers to talk one-on-one or in small groups with students to assess their understanding. Why does it always have to be written? There's no reason why we can't have small group conversations.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, Liz. And I think when we have these conversations, it's so easy to get lost in the tech of all of it and the kind of fear that surrounds us with like, oh, what's going to happen when AI takes over one day? But there really is no substitute for just those human connections and having those conversations and being able to sit down and develop those interpersonal skills and the skills that students need to vocalize those ideas as well. Because, I mean, when you're in a business meeting, which ultimately we're preparing students to become part of the workforce, if you're not able to articulate what you just wrote in, say, a report, then you're going to have a problem.
So you're a young student that's, starting college. And one of the things that we've talked about or read about is that students in your age group are worried about AI taking over jobs. And you've said it in a couple of different ways, like when AI takes over all the work. Is it something you're worried about? Is it something your peers talk about? Like, are you nervous picking a major in college because you're not sure if it'll be an obsolete task in a few years? Like, what do you think the general feeling for you and your peers is around AI? Like, is it going to take over everything?
Yeah, I mean, for me, as stereotypical and generic as it may sound, I kind of just rolled with the things that I was passionate about. I knew that I really liked computer science. I'm also pursuing public policy at UConn. So I knew that these were the things that I enjoyed, and I kind of picked my major knowing that I would probably have job security, not really thinking about AI and just having faith that things would work out because I'm passionate and I enjoy what I do. But in general, I would say there is a lot of fear surrounding just market saturation and further struggles that are kind of exacerbated by the existence of AI. One of my best friends actually is going to Harvard, and she's also a computer science major, but she is considering switching her major to finance because she's afraid that coming out of Harvard with a Harvard degree, she's not going to be able to find a job in computer science because of AI. So whether or not that's something that's going to come to fruition, I think is very hard to say, and I don't know. And I think a lot of it is in the hands of companies who need to make a choice about whether or not they want to really invest in AI. But ultimately, I think that people still need to just pursue what they're passionate about. And I think while there is a fear surrounding AI taking over jobs, I mean, there is a fear of computers taking over jobs too. And here we are.
You have a lot of insights on a wide range of topics. Some of this you may have just come to on your own, but you're thinking about your future and what you're going to study and the role of AI. Are you talking to your peers about this topic, or your parents or other adults or folks at school?
Well, yeah. So I'm talking to a lot of different people. I'm very lucky that my parents are pretty well-versed technology people. My dad especially works in computer science. He's over at Raytheon Technologies, and he knows his stuff when it comes to AI. He's a big news junkie as well, so the combination of those things makes him very knowledgeable on the subject. So I'm able to talk to him about it. And I'm also able to talk to different resources, especially up at UConn. One of my close friends is an AI researcher at UConn as well. And he is very knowledgeable. He likes to pop quiz me at like midnight about different AI subjects, which is not always appreciated. But in general, just having those resources, having friends who we're able to talk to, because it is such a hot topic, is really important, I think, for anyone in getting to know the subject better.
I would love to have you back here in 4 years as you're wrapping up your UConn career and like reflecting on how much things have changed and where your thoughts have gone. So when we're podcasting 4 years from now, we're going to have Charli back.
Perfect.
I think after that, you may have had a few more special guests, though.
Not as special as you right now, I gotta say.
There's only one first.
So, Charli, you're so thoughtful. I want to ask you like the questions that I find the most intriguing in this entire topic. And right now, one of them, we actually did an episode a little while ago about a college professor that developed a piece of, it's like a custom GPT. It's an AI bot, essentially, where students take their notes and do their research. And his contention is that the notes and the research are where the heavy lifting is happening cognitively. And so they take their notes and their research, they plug it into this bot, and the bot does the writing. And his argument is that making the words sound pretty, which is my most articulate way of describing that, but, sentence construction and the way one sentence flows into another is essentially something to wave the white flag on. Like, AI does that well, so why have students spend their time working on wordcraft when the big important part of their intellectual lift are the notes, the research, the outlining, the way those things go together? What do you think about that? Is it reasonable to wave the white flag on writing, or are we losing something if we, let the bot do the writing but the students do the outlining and the research?
No, I mean, I think it's really important when we're having any conversation about AI to evaluate what skills we're really concerned with our students learning and our students working on. So, I mean, when you're looking at a middle school setting, like we were discussing, versus a postgraduate setting, then yeah, it's going to be totally different. If you're a middle schooler, I'd like you to learn how to write an essay. But I totally agree with that mindset that for postgraduates or, students just in college, students in graduate schools, PhD students, it's really important that we're able to just evaluate the things that we need to do. So in this case, research, and use that just to our advantage while also using AI. Because at the end of the day, there are only so many hours in a day, and we need to really be able to maximize our time. And so, yeah, if we're able to, use an AI or a chatbot or something to write for us, then, yeah, I think that that's totally fine. Really, it's just a synthesis of subject matter. So
next fall, you're at UConn. Let's say you're in a class with a professor like this. You do, the research on some high-end robotics class that you're taking. You do the research, you do the outlining. Professor says, go ahead, let the bot do the writing. It does the writing. And you're not sure you really love what it did. You might think, I could have done that better. What do you do with that scenario?
Well, now don't report me to the Office of Academic Dishonesty. But in that scenario, I don't think that there's anything wrong with modifying writing because, we think about a lot of the flaws of AI when we're writing pieces and when we're doing communication bits. And you get a lot of those redundant sentences. You get a lot of overused language, a lot of the pointers that AI was used in the aiding of writing an essay. So in that case, yeah, I think that you should switch it up. Again, there's no substitute for a human mind, in my opinion, when we're working on written communication, language, all of these soft skills that people spend years developing. AI is not a hard and fast replacement for any of that. I mean, I could attest personally, when I was writing my college essays, I used ChatGPT for editing purposes because it's so easy to just plug it in and say, give me feedback on this part. What are some areas where I could improve? How is my narrative looking? That doesn't mean that I used it to write the essays, but being able to think about how to use it as a tool to maximize its potential is really important.
This brings up so many things that we've thought about, like that feeling of guilt, because as you're sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm always in classes, I'm always taking classes, I'm always writing stuff. And I'm like, oh, I think I'd feel guilty if I just gave it my ideas and was like, okay, now you write the dissertation. I did all the research, you write the dissertation. And I'd feel so guilty in a lot of ways, but should I, and is it okay? But it also brings up other things like the writer's strike, right? So if you just give it an idea for an episode of The Office that it's been trained on every other script for The Office for, 9 seasons, is it going to write a script in the style of The Office? And that's what the writers were striking about, really, right? So it just, it makes me nervous, but excited.
Oh, the guilt, Liz. I tell you, it's your Catholic school upbringing. Are you seeing like a nun and a ruler as you, go onto ChatGPT?
Not quite. But I do, I'm Catholic, I'm Italian. There's a lot of guilt.
All right. We're not going to probe too personally here, Charli, but do you get this sense of guilt, and do you think your peers get a sense of guilt sometimes when they use this, or is it just a tool and there's no reason to feel guilty about it?
I mean, I think it definitely depends on the room that you're in and the outlook that you're surrounded by. In a setting like robotics, absolutely not. When I'm at the shop, all of my fellow teammates want me to do anything that I can to get that code to work. They don't care what I have to use. All they care is that the robot does what it's supposed to do. But in different settings, certainly. I mean, for me, if I'm, say if I tried to use ChatGPT to write an essay or to come up with talking points for me for a podcast, then how could I feel good about that, knowing that people put time into that and I'm out here taking shortcuts? So I'm sure that there are a lot of students who will happily do it just to save themselves a few hours. But in general, I do think that we need to have some accountability about the fact that we need to hold ourselves to the same standards as that existed before AI was a thing. I mean, I know that my teacher wouldn't be happy at me if I was using ChatGPT or if I was using Claude. So I think that we need to make sure that we're holding ourselves to those standards, because at the end of the day, our teachers are there to help us learn, and we are trying to learn, and we will not learn if we're taking shortcuts.
You've mentioned Claude, by the way, a couple times, which I'm a big fan of as well. And one of the things, as Liz and I do work with school leaders and teachers, is to try to get them to see that there are actually a range of tools. ChatGPT is one, but what's Claude doing for you and how do you differentiate Claude versus the ChatGPT versus any other tool that you might be using?
Well, I think in general, when we're not talking about the nuance of the algorithms themselves and the trainings and how new they are, their innovativeness, I think that on paper, Claude and ChatGPT would look very similar to people. Claude is another large language algorithm. It's another chatbot that people are able to use very similarly in function to ChatGPT. But for me personally, I just prefer Claude. I think that when you're engineering prompts, when you're trying to get a certain thing out of it, it's a little bit easier to navigate. Claude is also really special because now, using their free standard basic version that anyone can access, you're able to upload documents and photos, and they're able to assess different photos. So there are some educational websites that don't allow you to copy and paste questions. If you're on a website like that, you could download the questions as a PDF, or you could take a screenshot of the questions and you could upload those to Claude, and Claude will deliver you answers as if you typed it in normally. And in ChatGPT, the only option is that typing in normally, but Claude has afforded users a lot more flexibility.
Are your peers hip to that? Because some of that sounds like, I got a worksheet I need to complete, and maybe Claude's the easiest way to upload that worksheet. Again, whatever comes to the ChatEDU podcast booth stays here, except for the listeners. But no, so are your peers using Claude in a similar way?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I think that when we talk about AI, everyone is hip to ChatGPT. Everybody's heard of ChatGPT. They're all too familiar. But for whatever reason, Claude and Anthropic, they're a little bit more on the down low. They're a little bit more hidden to those of us who are more keen to the AI landscape. So I'm not sure that students are as aware of that one. I think that there are definitely a fair amount of students who are more hip to it. But in general, I think that ChatGPT reigns supreme as the model that everybody likes to use.
Liz, how come you and I don't say stuff like hip to it? Would it just come off as we're super old? Because it sounds so cool when Charli says it.
Yeah, she's just 1,000 times cooler than us. So
yeah, good point.
I think there's no reason for us to use those words.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
So, in full transparency, when we first got your email, we were really excited to talk to you. And our assumption was that you were male because your name's Charli. And, I'm sure that we are not the first people to maybe assume that you were male. But I was so much more excited to see you come in. And we were so excited that you are a female thinking about AI and computer science, because we know that there's not a lot of representation of women in these fields. And as a woman, this was just so exciting to me to have your voice be the first voice that we're sharing beyond Matt and I. So what has your experience been like as a woman in CS and, going into AI and as you enter your college career?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that I haven't experienced a lot of discrimination, a lot of problems when it comes to CS and AI and just being a woman in those landscapes in general. I think that a lot of that is because I don't always fit people's expectations of what a woman should look like and a woman in these spaces. I mean, if you can't tell from my brief time talking on the podcast, I'm very loud, I'm very vocal, I have a lot of opinions and I have a lot of thoughts, and I share those opinions and I share those thoughts. So I think that assertiveness has kind of allowed me to carve out a space for myself. But in general, I also do my very best to put myself in spaces that allow for women in technology. So this past summer, I did a summer program called Tech Girls. That's 15 students from across the United States are chosen, and we went on an international exchange trip off to Washington, D.C. and Virginia Tech, where I met girls from 36 different countries, and I was able to work with girls from around the world who have similar interests to me. So just putting myself in those spaces where I'm able to interact with other women and I'm able to do the things that I'm passionate about has really helped me assert myself and know my stuff, because really, when you know your stuff, people are going to listen to you.
I think that's so true. I mean, clearly you're just so well spoken and I'd listen to you. So it's not about being male or female. It's your stuff, and you are clearly, just like you said, a strong voice and a strong leader. So I'm excited that you have had these opportunities already, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about what you do as you go off to UConn.
Tell us a little bit more about your plans in UConn. I know you're just getting there, but are there things you think about even beyond UConn?
Yeah,
By the way, sorry, we should say for our international listening audience that UConn is the University of Connecticut in beautiful Storrs, Connecticut. Charli's actually going to be living in about the coolest part of the Storrs campus because she's in the honors college. Big shock. But anyhow, tell us about what you're going to do at UConn.
Yeah, absolutely. So at UConn, I'm hoping to continue some of my work in AI so far. I actually did, as a continuation of that summer program, a little bit of work at Virginia Tech. I'm working on a paper right now where we used some AI algorithms to develop a molecule to help inhibit this protein that's active in the brains of Alzheimer's patients that contributes to plaque buildups. So I'm really interested, hence the internship at Medtronic, in looking at some of the ways that we can use AI and technology in the medical field. And I'm hoping that that's something that I can continue with. UConn has a really great bioinformatics program that I'm hoping to get a little bit involved with. And beyond that, I'd like to look at the policy and ethical implications as well with that public policy degree. So kind of a lot of realms that are really interesting to me, but there are a lot of areas that I'm really excited to look into when we look at the ethical applications of AI as well. I was a big student government nerd in high school, so I'm pretty well versed in policy, and I'm really excited to combine those two passions of mine.
Yeah, I have the sense, Liz, that there are going to be big things ahead for Charli, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that at all.
Can we talk a little bit about the generative AI and the work that you were doing with, tell me again the name of the molecule?
So we were working on developing the molecule, but it's the acetylcholinesterase protein.
Right, that's
I totally
what I
could have
thought.
told you that was the name, Matt.
So several months now ago, we did an episode called AI for Good, where we were trying to make the point that there's a general excitement and awareness and fear and anxiety about generative AI, all the words and the pictures and the videos and the songs, but the whole other world of AI, deep learning, machine learning, vision that impacts the kind of work that you might have been doing with health and with the environment and energy. So do you sometimes think about that? Oh, hey, this is a generative AI thing that I'm focused on here. And then, no, this is a different type of application of AI, which is about taking a large data set and making meaning or being able to make a breakthrough in health or Alzheimer's in this case.
I think that it's really important that not only as individuals, but as a collective society, we get better at differentiating between those different use cases for AI. Because you're absolutely right. A lot of the big fear is around generative AI, but we don't talk as much about AI that's used in our search algorithms, AI that makes Google work, AI that makes Instagram work, AI that makes basically all of the things in our phones that we use on a day-to-day basis work. And without those things, we would not be able to function nearly the same as we do in a society. And I mean, looking at the health applications, in our case, we were using this tool called Nina, and Nina helped us dock a ligand in this, which is like a molecule in this protein, so that it had what's called a binding cavity. And there are infinitely many different positions that this molecule can dock into in this binding cavity of the protein. And in these proteins, every fold that exists has a different action associated with it. Proteins actually work based on how they're folded. And so when we use these AI tools, it's able to help us quickly figure out what the most likely case is for this protein in situations like folding, to understand how it works medically, and just in general. We're able to so much more quickly find solutions to these complex problems in science and in medicine when we use AI.
Matt, we totally did a story on the ways that proteins fold. And so I actually understood all of I understood 3 sentences of what she was saying.
I've already decided this podcast title is going to be, It's All Going to Be Okay. Charli is here.
Charli.
Now we just need another million or so of your generation to have this kind of level of intellect and insight. And our Social Security is just fine, Liz.
That's right. I'm banking on more Charlis.
Hey, I know plenty.
What have we not talked about that we should have so far? I mean, it's a funny question, but is there anything we haven't asked you about that you're like, these guys have a couple teachers and some school leaders and superintendents, including your own superintendent that listens to this podcast, or your former superintendent. So now you can say anything you like. Are there topics that we haven't talked about that you think are useful for those kinds of audiences?
Well, I mean, I'd like to ask you two the same question that you had for me about what you think about what kind of your peers think about AI, and do you guys have the sense that your peers are afraid of AI stealing your jobs?
That's a good question. I love getting the tables turned too. We live in a bubble a little bit. Here at our agency, Liz and I are both on an AI planning team. Ahmed is as well. Our executive director, John Costa, is very enthusiastic. So in this world, in this little bubble, we're all feeling relatively optimistic, but also mindful of, what are the skills that we have to really focus on in terms of, I'm not worried about Terminator, but, I have a kid in college. I want to make sure that he's focusing on the skills that will be durable for him to navigate any real major job changes and job dislocation. Actually, my older son is very conscious of it. So I think I worry about that part more. But in general, we are in this happy little pocket where a lot of us are asking tough questions, but also feel generally kind of glasses half full about the prospect of AI in our lives.
Yeah, I think when we then leave the agency and we do a lot of work with teachers in schools, those are the people that we are sympathetic for. We certainly understand that their job has become infinitely harder at the same time that it has become easier. So there are things that have become easier for them, but so many things that have made it more complicated. A few months ago, we talked about how the top, 5 of the top 10 apps are all apps to do homework that, make homework easier. So we're certainly sympathetic to that. We are very convinced that the job of a teacher will not be replaced. It may change. It will change. But, we see a lot of that fear and a lot of teachers that are afraid of even dipping their own toes into it. They're afraid their students are using it. They're afraid of what it does mean for the future.
It's funny because we are pretty gentle about something that you said so plainly, and I just love your voice and ability. So Liz and I spent a lot of time working with teachers and school leaders around this cheating thing, right? And one of the solutions is for teachers to craft assignments. One is, as you said, just get with the program. Like if writing's important, understand that writing is important and make sure that your students understand it. But alternatively, do other kinds of assessments, videos, oral presentations, et cetera, et cetera. And we just go about that very gently. We have this thing called durable activity prompting, and we're careful about how we navigate our way into it. And I love the clarity of you being able to say, nope, your job as a teacher is to make sure that if, writing needs to happen, writing happens. Or if, that writing assignment is lame and AI was going to do it, figure it out, do something different. And I was just with a group with some students and on an AI planning team. And one of the things that one of the students said just so plainly is, if you want me to document when I'm using AI in my work, you as a teacher need to document when you're using AI in their work. And it's harder for us in our roles, to your question, to say things quite so clearly. But boy, it's very effective when students say it directly.
Yeah, I think we've talked so much about the importance of having student voice. So I think it's so appropriate that our first guest is a student and that we get to hear your voice and not just assume and make assumptions about what students are thinking.
What do you think? Obviously, Matt, you mentioned that there's been a little bit of an explosion in your job as AI in education, and there's been more interest in the past few years. So what do you think sparked that?
I think a few things that we've talked about. I mean, certainly, I think that ChatGPT specifically, when it came out, just caused a level of anxiety among teachers and school leaders about two things. One is cheating, but I just think cheating is such a crude shortcut for what hopefully is underneath that emotion, which is worrying that students won't develop some of the skills that they need to. I think teachers truly care that their students walk out the door as good researchers, good problem solvers, effective writers. And I think there's just this collective worry that those kinds of useful cognitive skills, which is a phrase we use here a lot, the AI is going to shortcut.
Yeah, ChatGPT seemed like the catalyst for all of this. Starting in November 2022, that was when Matt has a great ability to see the writing on the walls before most people, and you were like on it from December 1st, 2022.
I totally echo Matt's point, though, that I think that this is such a contentious issue because people care about their kids and people care about making sure that their kids are educated and in a position to do as well as they can.
And I think this is just the beginning. I mean, what happened earlier this summer when OpenAI released a voice model that sounded like Scarlett Johansson, that felt human. I mean, I think some of these larger anxieties that go beyond the academic realm, are people going to have clear boundaries between AI and other people and their emotions? I mean, again, I don't think we're in Terminator territory, but I think as AI becomes more present in different kinds of ways, in voice, in vision, in holographics eventually, maybe we'll embrace the holodeck. You probably were not a Star Trek person, right?
Oh, I'm vaguely familiar.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, I think it's early days. I think we had this first wave of anxiety, and I suspect it's going to get a little bit bigger. And so we'll all be busy having these kinds of conversations, and you'll be busy, doing the work that you're doing, especially the flip side of the coin, the thing that I think will help with all of the anxiety are the advancements that will happen in Alzheimer's, in medicine, in energy, in food security, in global warming. And so I'm really hopeful that the positive effects of AI are going to be a counterbalance to some of the anxieties that generative AI specifically has created. So let's talk about some non-AI stuff. And I know we're going a little long. We got to free you from our warm recording studio at some point. So one fascinating thing that I learned today is that you drive stick. You drive a manual transmission car, a Subaru, just like I do. How many of your peers that you know drive stick?
Rumor has it there was one girl who graduated a year before me who knew how to drive stick, and that is the only one that I know of who learned on a stick shift car. But with that being said, I'm going to have to bump that number to like 3 of my peers because I did teach 2 of my friends how to drive my car.
How did that go?
Well, my clutch did make a funny sound and had a little bit of a funny smell, but all seems well. The car still drives. And I mean, I have to say, they did a better job than I think I did my first time learning to drive.
Now, you explained to us that your parents had a particular rationale for you driving a manual transmission. Can you explain that?
They did. I mean, everybody is worried about teenagers with their texting and driving, but not my parents because my hands are always busy navigating the shifter and the steering wheel. So they wanted my hands to be busy. They wanted my hands to be away from like food or my phone while I was driving. They really just wanted me to be locked in. And I have to say, it's a really effective strategy. My car's been in the shop for the past couple of days. I was telling Matt, I also need new air conditioning in my car. So I've been driving my mom's car, which is automatic. She's reverted back to the luxury life since driving stick. And I don't feel as locked into driving as I normally do. I'm like, what the heck? How do I know how fast I'm going if I don't have to pay attention to when I shift?
Such a great strategy to get kids to not drive with their phones. I love it. Maybe we should all go back to manual cars.
So, Liz, I'm going to go back to my theme about feeling safe, right? I mean, Charli, I don't want you to walk out the door thinking you are queen of the world, though we clearly think you are. But I think, we're safe on the road with you with both hands occupied and safe in the pathway of the work that you're doing. And we're just really, really grateful for your time and your talents. And I would love to have you come back 4 years. I don't know, come back every year. We'll do the summer of Charli and we'll do a little check-in. How's that sound?
That sounds great. It was such a pleasure to meet you and so much fun to have this conversation. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with the both of you.
Another fun podcast, Liz. We'd be so grateful if you consider taking just 30 seconds to give us a 5-star review.
Or 4, but let's shoot for 5.
And if it's a 4-star rating, right, Liz? Email us at chatedu@edadvance.org.
That's chatedu@edadvance.
And we'll figure out how to make it better. But if you got a full minute, a review would be fantastic. Let's roll the credits.
ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Ahmed Malik, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson. Gary is the ChatEDU Design and Outreach Ginsu Knife, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. Finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
See you next time.
Bye.
Hello, followers of ChatEDU. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am proud to be the Executive Director of EdAdvance, the Regional Educational Service Center in Litchfield, Connecticut. On behalf of Matt, Liz, and our entire agency, I want to thank you for listening and for your interest in this vital educational topic. During the summer, we will continue to drop weekly ChatEDU episodes, some of which will be in a special in-depth interview format with interesting guests that I think you will enjoy. Our regular weekly features will return as the summer winds down, and we hope you will keep an eye out for our in-depth AI community of practice and also our new AI micro-credentials for both teachers and educational leaders during the 24-25 school year. Take care, thanks again, and please tell your friends and colleagues about ChatEDU.